I'd like to begin by acknowledging the traditional owners of country throughout Australia and their connections to land, sea, and community, and my respects to elders past, present, and emerging. And to just begin our chat, I'd like us to do introductions, just to give people a sense of who you are. Just say your name, a little bit about yourself, and including where you are at the moment and what kinds of COVID-19 related restrictions are in place in your part of the world. So I'm Susie Claflin, and I am an MS researcher. I'm in Tasmania, and in Tasmania right now, we are lucky enough to be under relatively minor COVID-19 related restrictions. Would the other panelists like to start introductions?
Okay, I'm Cathy Del Terrio. I'm in Melbourne, so I'm under curfew and distress, state of distress. So it's, yeah, very, very mentally isolating here. And I'm a peer support volunteer with MS Limited.
Great, thank you.
I'm Mike Welsh. I'm also in Melbourne, so we're under stage 4, hence the kind of face masks and all of those sorts of things. I have 2 kids who are homeschooling behind me at some point, so potentially have the possibility of them coming through the door right behind me. I'm an advocate for MS Australia, which is where my involvement for this has come through. I've been on a fairly long journey with MS, both through my mum and through myself, over probably the last 25 years or so. Yeah, finding the lockdown interesting, shall we say.
Great, thank you. Thanks, Mike.
Well, maybe I'll introduce myself after Mike, because I have a shared experience of also homeschooling. And so mine I can vaguely hear in the distance, but I have a couple at primary school, and boy, does it make things interesting. So I'm also in Melbourne. We're on stage 4 restrictions. It's a bit hardcore, but you know, it is what it is. And I guess we're all doing our best. And I'm somebody that lives with MS. I was diagnosed in 2001. And I'm also a psychologist. I work predominantly with people with multiple sclerosis. So I'm hearing a lot about what social isolation means to different people.
And your name, just quickly.
Oh, sorry. And my name's Sally Shaw.
There we go. Great.
Thanks, Susie.
No worries.
Hi, everyone. I'm Bridie Phillips. I'm actually one of the nurse advisors that works with MS. And I'm one of the Melbourne people, so we're down here under stage 4 restrictions, and it's pretty tough going. So I've been working from home for over 5 months, which is an interesting way to work, with advantages and disadvantages, and I'm sure we'll sort of touch on that. I have a couple of adult sons still living at home. My husband also has multiple sclerosis, so sort of also a full-time carer in that role as well. So, but he is actually working from home as well. So there's quite a bit of an element of all sorts of things happening in this household.
Great, thanks, Bridie.
I'm Linda. I'm in New South Wales. It's not too bad here with the COVID-19 where I am. And we had one case like a couple of weeks ago. So everything seems okay here. So I've been isolated. I have MS that was diagnosed in 1998. And I've been isolated pretty much since March on my own with 2 cats. So I've written the coronavirus funny story. And yeah, this should be interesting. I think I've never done something like this before.
Great. Thanks so much, Linda. We really appreciate you joining us. And the 2 other people in the chat that viewers might be seeing are Vivian Jones and Jacob Foreman, who are members of the Menzies Institute MS Flagship, and they are here for both technological and moral support. But so we're going to move on into the beginning of our conversation. And the first discussion question that I'd really like to open up and have everyone sort of weigh in on is, what is social isolation? It's a big term. So what does it mean to you? What has the experience of social isolation been like for you, and how does it affect you? You can talk about generally, or you can talk about specifically in a COVID-19 related world. And I sort of turn it over to you to see your thoughts.
Susie and group, I would like to say that at the beginning of this whole COVID process, I was a little bit like, well, welcome to my world, because I've been living a life of a lot social isolation, having had chronic fatigue for many years and then an MS diagnosis. And so it wasn't so tremendous for me to experience what was going on. It's sort of worn a bit thin by now, but it's something that I thought other people aren't dealing with, but I'm used to it in many ways. But I'll just leave it there for now.
No, that's really interesting, Cathy. And we'll come back around to talking about the strategies that you've learned about how to deal with social isolation, because it sounds like you have like a real wealth of experience and knowledge around that I'd really like to touch on. Does anyone else have anything they'd like to talk about?
I think that I'm an extrovert, so I get my energy from people. I like being with people. I like spending time with people, and I spent probably the last, I mentioned earlier on, I haven't been working in an office environment for sort of 9 months. And before that, I spent my entire career in and around kind of large organizations in big offices with lots of people. And even then, I spent a lot of time working from home, and I've been quite a passionate advocate of working from home and the importance of kind of flexible work arrangements and those side of things. And all of that there was predicated on things, silly things like as a person that enjoys people, being able to just go and sit in a cafe on a day when I'm working from home and I'm isolated potentially, and I've taken the kids to school and I've dropped them off, just being able to go and sit in a coffee shop and just get the buzz of people. And I think that lack of, we've been asked in this work from home environment and in this don't go out anywhere environment to do this, but our traditional mechanisms, traditional in working from home, because it's really, we've been doing it a long time, our traditional mechanisms in and of that would be to find a way to get that social interaction that you were looking for. So it might be it could be you just go for a meal out with your partner, or how you spend time talking to people at the school gates, just these sorts of things. And we've taken all of those kind of social avenues away from people, and they're 2-minute fleeting conversations that you might have when you're dropping your kids off at the school or doing those things, and they've been taken away. So all of the other coping strategies that you might have had if you were in a kind of environment where you were on they've gone. And so we've had to learn, and we've had to find new ones and different ones, and I don't know how anybody else has felt, that we've become a lot more insular. So we've become a lot more reliant on, I certainly have a lot more reliant on my wife, Kate, and spending the time with the kids. We're, sorry, the kids, just I can hear noises behind me. And I'm quite deliberately trying to stay away from like social media and Facebook and all of those sorts of things. I think it's just a massive distraction to the world. I'm going to have to go in and just deal with something. Just hold on for 1 second. I've got a child crying behind me. I'm going to put myself on mute, deal with this, and let someone else have a talk.
Totally fine. Thanks so much, Mike.
Maybe I can jump in at that point and say that I agree. It's that sense of geographical isolation. And I think that was spoken about really early, that, let's not be socially isolated. Let's make sure we maintain the social connectedness, but recognize that we're geographically isolated. And I think we all jumped on board to begin with and thought that's a good way to look at it. Yes, we can still connect with our friends and we can all do Zoom dinner parties. And then I think for most of us, that's worn a little bit thin. I know some people are still really able to do it, and there are lots of WhatsApp groups and lots of ways to connect with our friends and family, and telephone calls, and all really important things. But that geographical isolation takes its toll. And I think that's really, really evident when we look at other people that we love. So we're going to have obviously more discussion about people with MS and ourselves in particular, but also when we look at our children and we look at maybe older relatives, that social isolation is really hard as well. I think it's quite upsetting for most parents to see their kids away from their friendship groups. It's really hard to see, I've got a grade 6 student at the moment, Hamish, and he was so desperately looking forward to being a leader at his school. And it just is heartbreaking to see that he is stuck at home with his sister, luckily, but stuck at home with boring old mum and dad day in and day out. And both of the kids just are desperate to be silly with their friends. So I think when we talk about social isolation, it's important for us to recognise that it's about us and our connections and our coping strategies, like Mike was talking about, but also we take a toll when we look at those people that we love missing out as well. And that incidental geographical isolation that we're experiencing now, that Mike was talking about, the chats at the school gate or the chats, even the chats in the supermarket. I think we're much less likely to have a random chat with a stranger than we used to. And that can be really difficult for us as well.
I think that's a really powerful point, Sally, that you're making, that it's not just the impact on us individually, but the impact on our communities that can also sort of affect us and the people we love. Linda and Bridie, did you have
I just came back in right at the end of that one, Sally, and just caught the piece that you were saying around the supermarkets. I actually had some really interesting conversations with people at the supermarket. This was during lockdown 1.0, and where people were just a little bit more. Oh no, you go there. Oh, you go for. And there was, I got into a conversation with someone at the supermarket. I was standing for like 15, 20 minutes. I was like, I can't remember the last time I did that. Just talk to. Now this time around, by the lockdown 2.0, it's get out of my way, shut up, don't. I don't want to have any conversation. And it has changed second time round.
That's really interesting, Mike, and I'd love to like circle back and talk about that more, the difference between sort of as time has gone on, that the COVID-19 restrictions have had a different impact as they've sort of progressed. I think that's a really interesting point to come back to. Linda and Bridie, is there anything you'd like to add to this sort of discussion?
Yeah. No, look, I sort of agree with what everyone's saying, because I guess if you look at the true definition of social isolation, it's sort of like that complete lack of contact with society. And I guess with all the social media around, theoretically, and particularly with the first stage of lockdown, we sort of really embrace that sort of social contact through social media. You could still see people. This time around, I find personally it's really hit a lot harder, and because the restrictions are a lot tougher too. For me, social isolation, that's a real tongue twister, isn't it? It's kind of that real lack of face-to-face contact with, your friends, family, colleagues, and clients as well, and in particular with my sort of work. Now, I'm really lucky because I can continue the sort of work that I was doing, a lot of the phone-based stuff, but we used to do a lot of, outreach clinics and face-to-face stuff that I can't do that now. So I've sort of had to transition from home, but I actually find it really quite lonely, on a personal thing. I haven't seen my grandsons for weeks and weeks and weeks, and they're only little people and they don't really understand why they can't see nanny. So from that point of view, and and my immediate family and things like that, I find that really tough. But I'm also a very touchy-feely, get in there, that camaraderie in the workplace where you have a conversation and you go, that was really tough. Or you turn around to the person behind you and go, oh, what do you think about this? And you sort of I'm really finding this time round, I think it's impacting a lot of people in a greater way than what it has. I mean, you're sort of picking up on a lot of skills using all this social media, but there is this real lack of, I really just want to touch you. I really want to be in that same room with you sort of feeling.
In March, I started a new medication for MS called Mavenclad. And then a couple of weeks later, the middle of March, the doctor and the MS nurse said, you need to just be isolated because your immune system's right down. So I had rules that no going anywhere. So there's just me and my two cats. And I've pretty much been doing that since March. And I actually am not finding it too bad. Like, this sounds bad, but like, there's so many people that are helping me, like all my friends, family, the telehealth, the doctor, the MS nurse. I've got a list of them. Like, there's just so many people out there, the background of people, and you can just really notice who's coming on board to help. And then I'm just looking for funny stories about everybody, and yeah, I'm not finding it too bad. So yeah.
That's great, Linda. Thank you so much for that perspective. I think that really speaks to the fact that social isolation is a really personal thing, that it really can be completely different from person to person, and it depends on so many different factors. And it sounds wonderful that you've got so much community support. It's like that's, and you've got a wonderful perspective on it. But I'd like to continue talking a little bit about how the social isolation makes you feel. Like, I think it's something that we talk about in a general way when we say, oh, social isolation, and we, with the expectation that everyone sort of feels the same way about it. And I don't think that's true. So I'd love to get a little bit more about your experiences of how it makes you feel, but also for Sally and Bridie, who work with a lot of people, maybe a broader sense of the impacts you are seeing in the community.
Well, I'd like to make the point that Cathy made before. Cathy said when this whole thing started, it was almost a tinge of, well, welcome to my world. You know, this is how I live every day of my life, or this is how I've had to spend years adjusting to coping with a relative social isolation. And now, you know, Cathy will speak, but certainly I was shocked when I transitioned all of my clients to Zooming. I was shocked with the increase in mood for the first couple of weeks. Now, that maybe hasn't maintained, but for the first couple of weeks, I was very surprised at how many people were almost, I don't want to say enjoying the state of COVID-19 in March, but they were suddenly aware that other people were getting an inkling of their world, getting a little bit of the idea of the uncertainty and the sense that, you know, you have some of your freedoms taken away and that you might want to go to work and, oh, you're being told you're not allowed to, or you're being told that there is something out of your control. And for a lot of people with MS, it was actually just a moment where they could step back and be quite interested and quite curious in other people's responses to this. And Cathy, you might want to say more about that.
Absolutely, Sally. It's been at the early stage. It was really interesting to see how people were and were not coping with things. I often say that I live in a virtual world because I do spend a lot of time. A lot of my peer support volunteering is telephone support, and for years I've had to say no to going out because of my level of fatigue, and I got to the point where my social circle became so small, it, you know, virtually diminished. And having said that, like, I've got a great group of women who are my support workers, and they've been fantastic, but I've also had to change my mental step. I live in a bubble here. I don't watch news. I don't watch television. I choose what I want to watch because it's not something I can control. And it's important to disconnect from that. I can't put that stress on me, that worry of what's going on in the world, because it will make my MS worse. I don't know. So I just say to my support workers, what do I need to know today? Are things getting better or not? Because I don't really delve into it much, because that thing will bring me down too much. Make sense?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much, Cathy. And Linda and Mike and Bridie, did you have anything you wanted to add about how social isolation makes you feel, or your clients?
I'm happy to. I think, and I think both both Cathy and Sally have touched on this a little bit. An MS diagnosis basically says you need to adapt your lifestyle. There's lots more to it than that, and there's a lot of but one of the things that it says is, yeah, that lifestyle that you used to have before and those things that you used to do, you can't do those anymore. You've got to change them. And I'm sure all of us could tell stories about how we used to be able to do this and we can't anymore, and so this is the change that we've needed to make. And for me, it was brutal in terms of if I didn't look after myself and if I didn't manage myself in the right way, it was debilitating in terms of, it actually manifests itself as migraines with me, and the migraines that just meant that I would have to just go and lie in a room for an hour. And I've learned over many, many years to manage those, to spot them when they're coming, to be really early with it, but also lifestyle changes. Don't do this, stop doing that. Don't push yourself to, know when you can do these sorts of things. And so this COVID piece is just another set of constraints and we're used to managing constraints. That's one of the things that MS gives us is an ability to manage constraints. And so this is just another set of them.
I think that's a really powerful point, Mike. And actually, maybe this is a good time to sort of segue. We've heard from both Cathy and Mike that there's a level of filtering maybe about the news that you're seeking out. So that seems like one approach that's being taken, and the other is that Mike has mentioned that you already have all these skills from living with MS. When approaching the additional social isolation of COVID-19. So maybe this is a good moment to talk about, has COVID-19 sort of intensified the social isolation? Has it in some ways, mitigated that, with people working from home more? So maybe people in your house or at home more, maybe that actually reduces some level of isolation. I'm just interested in how that has changed your approach to dealing with social isolation and how it's changed your experience of it.
I'll start. It's been interesting. I mentioned kind of off camera before we were recording that I've not been working for 9 months, and the reason why I've not been working for 9 months is we've been building a house. That house is 4 doors down the street from where we're living at the moment. So I've actually been able to, and we can still now, even under stage 4 restrictions, we're able to carry on. It's a construction site, it's a residential construction site, as long as we keep less than 5 people on site on any given day, and we track who's going in and out, and we have a plan, and all that, we can still carry on. And so I've been able, that's been my kind of social interaction and my social side of things. And we live on a fairly quiet street, so the kids are able to go up and down on their roller skates and on their bikes and that sort of stuff. And so that's been our get out the house because it's driving us stir crazy kind of piece. And I've been able to go down and talk to my chippy or my plumber at various points, and at least have a mask on and a conversation. But I have no idea what's going on in the working world. Like, I've got no idea what people have been experiencing over the last little while. And I was interacting last week through WhatsApp with someone that I used to work with, and I've just got no idea what they've been going through for the last 9 months. And how things have changed. And I'm like, at some point I'm going to have to start working, probably in the next kind of month to 6 weeks. And I'm like, I'm going to be like a new kid at school again. I just don't quite know what it all means. So that's going to be an interesting thought around the social isolation, is that it's not necessarily a social isolation from people, because I've still been able to get that interaction with people. But the people that I've been able to have that social interaction with are not necessarily the people that I'm going to be having social interactions with in the upcoming kind of 12 months. And we've got different experiences, and there is going to be a clash of cultures for me returning to that.
Thanks so much, Mike. I think that's really interesting. It seems like you're talking about shifting your social sphere, that COVID-19 has sort of changed like who is inside the circle of your social interaction. I think that's really interesting. Has that been true for anyone else, or is that completely not true for other people?
I'd like to talk, I guess, a little more broadly, but to Mike's point and to your question, Susie, of whether this social isolation that has been brought to us by COVID had made things better or worse for people who may have had relative social isolation previously. Certainly for a couple of my clients who have in their 40s or 50s decided to finish work because they couldn't work in the same capacity that they could have prior to MS. So decided to is a tricky way to say it, but they've been forced, I guess, to finish up work and have struggled or have worked hard to find other areas of purpose, other areas to find their meaning. They've had to create projects for themselves to keep themselves going, to have purpose and meaning and to enjoy life. And then this has happened, and suddenly the people in their lives, in their family and in their households, these are people that are partnered or have children who are now working from home. So back to that point of finding social isolation because of COVID-19 actually a lot easier, because their houses are not vacant between the hours of 8 and 6 like they used to be, and they are sharing an experience with their loved ones where their loved ones have had that taken out of their control as well, which I guess brings up the point that we talked about before. But for some, when stage 2 lift or stage 3 lifted and people started going back to work, that was a really, really difficult time for a lot of people with MS who are otherwise left at home. And then stage 4 happened in Melbourne, and maybe it's been slightly better for some people with MS because their family members are having to return home again. So it's an interesting, as you say, it's so different for every person. But I really like Mike's point about the fact that amidst stage 4 restrictions or even stage 3 restrictions, your purpose and your aim and the project that keeps you going in life is 4 houses down the street, which is great, and introduces you to a whole different level or different group of people to socialize with. But working from home will be different and will have other challenges.
Hey, that's great. I from a clinical point of view, so a lot of people that I talk to who have MS or their carers, or and some people call in anonymously, obviously, because they're concerned. I've actually found, and particularly with this second round of restrictions, that a lot of the clients are a lot more fearful. And what that means is that they're fearful of people being in contact with them or going out to get the shopping, or how are they going to do this? And what that is actually doing is increasing their stress levels. And so what I'm finding is an increase of long, complicated phone calls of highly stressed people, which obviously then impacts their symptoms. And so a lot of the calls, there's a lot more. I guess my role is also a little bit of social worky stuff as well, just talking through and unpacking on what is actually going on, and giving them some strategies around how we can manage this, and trying to give them some factual information as much as I can be up to date on what's happening with COVID as well, trying to relieve some of their stress and their tensions and things like that. Families that are sort of got people with them seem to be doing a little bit better, but there are an enormous a lot of clients who are actually living on their own. And this I'm finding a little bit more impact. Or if they are on their own and they're very, very focused on COVID, I've had some quite significant calls with people who really aren't coping with this at all, and talking them through how to get sort of supports and sort of help with that. So I'm actually finding quite a lot of mood impact. Obviously the people that I often talk to are people who are reaching out for support or asking for help. So I have to clarify that I'm not saying that, everybody's like that, but this is one of the things that I am actually finding at the moment. And it's, really quite interesting. And I know from a personal point of view, I'm actually a very social person. And being forced to stay inside these 4 walls and not having that direct contact with people, I'm actually finding, and I'm sure people in the MS community would be as well, I'm actually finding that I'm more tired. and haven't got the same motivation that I might have had before. I'm actually ready for bed at 7 o'clock. And what I'm actually finding is that because I don't have to drive to work, I don't get that downtime from going from the office back to home. And switching off is as simple as sort of, just turning the computer off. So I'm working longer hours, spending more time with people. Probably taking that to bed, which isn't a great thing, because it's really difficult to do that switch on, switch off thing from a working point of view. So I was actually kind of hanging to get back to the office so that I could sort of break my day up. But I also feel at this time that because I'm hearing the stress levels and how people are feeling out there in general from some of these calls that I'm having, I'm wanting to put more in. I'm wanting to help these people and find ways to support them through it. It's really, really interesting how COVID is affecting different people in different circumstances.
Bridie, can I just, sorry,
Oh, no,
Susie, I was just going to say that's just brilliant to reflect on the fact that it is having a huge impact on people's mood. But also you talk about, we're talking about the secondary implications of COVID-19 being the social isolation and all the challenges that it brings. But if you look at the primary impact of people's fear levels and how it impacts the fear about the virus and how it's impacted on their stresses, it is huge and it's hard. And it's a great point, Bridie, that shouldn't be overlooked in a forum like this about how anxiety provoking this is and how difficult it is for people and how it is really impacting them on their mental health, but also their ability to enjoy life as well.
I think that's really interesting, and it really encapsulates how variable people's experiences are. Linda, I want to make sure you get a chance to weigh in.
So I don't know if I mentioned, but I wrote a coronavirus story, and it's actually a funny story about all the things that have happened to me, while I've been isolated. And the reason I wrote it was because all the people were helping me and I wanted to recognise them. But also, like what Bridie just said, which is true, people are not taking this too well. And if they read this funny story or some funny things, you might see it as So, and I also think challenge yourself, and so that's why I wanted to put a story together of, some funny things that are happening, and maybe that can cheer some people up.
I think that's wonderful. That's a great perspective to have. Does anyone else have anything they want to add on this topic before I start?
Linda, you just reminded me that we've been building this house, and one of the things that we did was I took the kids around before the plaster went up and got them, and they've drawn pictures in the house that are now hidden behind plaster. And but officially that didn't happen, if anyone asked. And so if someone in some point in many, many years from now is going to uncover a time capsule of 2020 and what the kids meant around their homeschooling, and there's lots of darn COVIDs and all of these sorts of things written on, but there's also pictures of family and happy things and that sort of stuff. But you just reminded me that we do like to keep records, and we do like to, we are storytellers. That's how kind of things get sort of through from each generation, and how we tend to process what's happening to us.
So when I wrote the story it's going to the National Archives in 20 years' time. They'll open it. But yeah, just all the funny things so I haven't stepped in a supermarket since March, and so I've got to order groceries. And one day I ordered the groceries, and then that night I thought, gee, these groceries are a bit expensive. And then I looked through the list of what I'd done, and I'd ordered $72 worth of salmon. And I thought, okay, I can't be doing that. And then what happened next was I rang the 1300 number, and the lady said to me, she said, don't worry. She said, we can sort it. But she said, I once ordered a whole heap of wine and it came to my house. And, so luckily I didn't get the salmon.
Yeah.
But there's just so many funny stories. And I think if you try to look for that, it makes it a bit better.
I think I love that approach. I think that's wonderful. And I think this is a great moment to sort of segue and talk about the strategies you use to deal with social isolation. And storytelling seems like one of them, that you can share your experience in a funny way, or share it with other people and bring that sense of community by telling stories. I think another thing that I've heard from, I think, a few people mentioning is this idea of maybe increased empathy, that because people are experiencing things that people living with MS experience just by virtue of being people living with MS, the sort of wider community is joining that experience. It sounds like maybe there's a sense of community that's increasing because you have this shared experience. And I think that's really interesting, but I'd love to hear more about different strategies people are using, and even just the things that surprise them about things that were helpful with dealing with social isolation, or things that are distinctly not helpful. What did you try that did not work?
I wouldn't mind weighing in here, Susie, because a number of you have said, and Bridie, you're a very tactile person. I am too. I come from an Italian family, and I know that this is the German part, but all my sisters have moustaches. But I acutely at the moment, I'm missing personal touch. Just I see my physio has been coming every Monday, and the last couple of weeks, she's been sort of doing a lymphatic massage, and she's leaning over me, and I've just put my hand on her lower back, and she said, "Oh, it was a joke. Is that inappropriate touching?" And we made a joke. I said, "No, I'm just missing human touch," and it's actually been really, really hard for me, because prior to COVID, a lot of emotions have come out in my life just because of challenges that I've had. And my support workers are so lovely, and they'll just give me a big hug, we can't do that now. We just can't even do that. And for me, that's actually a really difficult thing. I haven't got a cat, Linda. I haven't got any. Two of my support workers have been bringing their dogs to work, which has been beautiful, because I've bonded with pets that I normally wouldn't. I'm certainly in this second part of the this more extreme part of the lockdown, found a lot more sleeping and a lot more pajama days, which are not good for me. I've got to get out of that, because it's gone on a bit too long for me. Even though I've got these wonderful women who come in and do things, it's just a little bit too long, I'm finding. So it's very tricky to navigate at times.
Absolutely, Cathy. And I think it's an important point that even when you do use strategies to try and improve your experience, sometimes it's still hard. That doesn't mean that all the difficulties go away. Linda, do you want to take this moment to talk about your cats? I for one want to know more about them.
Oh, the cats. The cats, I think pets, they do something. And I think that I kind of recognize a bit more about them. They are quite funny. Even when I'm asleep, I'll just, in the morning, I go to touch my phone to, know to get up. As soon as I do that, I hear the cat jump out of its bed. I think, they just know, they're just funny. So, yeah. And I also think that you can give yourself a bit of a challenge while you're being isolated. Yeah, so I've done a cross stitch, and I was going to show everyone this is what I'm meant to be coming up with. So it's actually quite a challenge. And then this is what I've done so far. So yeah, so I've got to so it's stuff like, if you can just be doing something, I'm supposing that can help. Yeah. And talking to people in the phone. Without the phone, I think I'd be pretty cactus. So, and the computer and Zoom, I never knew anything about Zoom. I don't know if anybody else did before, yeah, this all happened. And then like my work's become on Zoom, and yeah, so I think if you can still talk to people somehow, that's helping. Yeah.
Could I also talk about coping strategies, in that I think we all spend, quite subconsciously, we spend decades of our lives developing and getting to know what coping strategies work for us. And socializing isn't everybody's go-to coping strategy, but it tends to be in there in some form. And Mike said that he's a really social extrovert. And so it's a really important part of his coping strategies that he maintain that kind of some level of significant and meaningful socializing. But I think we've all been quite hard on ourselves over recent months, because a lot of us are left scratching our head. Why aren't I coping better? I thought this would be fine. Like I've got all of my basic needs met, maybe. And so why am I feeling so flat? And so I think recognizing that we've built these coping strategies that are really personal and individual, and then almost overnight they were taken away from us, can be quite difficult, take some adjustment. But the coping strategies are so different for every person. And Linda, I loved the fact that you touched on that real need for not only cats, important, I have a dog, so I think that's important too, but to have meaning and purpose, and to ultimately say, and Bridie was talking about this before, ultimately say, and Cathy as well, and Mike, we've all talked about the need to recognize what you have a level of control over, and then choose your behavior, choose your actions to help get your head and your heart into a more comfortable place. You know, thinking and feeling, they often happen without much of our own input. We think thoughts like that, we feel all the feelings, but we can choose our behaviors. So I love the idea of, you know, what do I have control over today that I can really put my energy behind? And also, what can I choose not to do? Like Cathy said, I'm not a big fan of the news at the moment. If I don't need to know 24/7 COVID numbers, and that doesn't make me feel either neutral or positive, why am I exposing myself to it? So limiting news is really important for some people. For some people, they lap it up and it doesn't affect their mood state. For most of us, we've all figured out that maybe 15 minutes is enough. Maybe not 6 hours. Maybe we don't have to listen to the entire Premier's update, but maybe just the first 5 minutes. But choosing, and also maybe choosing, you know, do I have control over whether I stay in my jammies today, which can be liberating and a self-care day, or actually do I know that it will make me feel a little bit better if I get dressed and changed today and feel like I'm getting up and doing things? And the decision doesn't have to be the same each day. So one day, jammies are absolutely the way we should all be headed. And then another day, it might be better to, you know, have a shower and get ready for the day earlier. So I think there are so many different individualized coping strategies, but often for me, it comes down to what do I have control over and where can I throw my behavior? Because if I can start acting in a way that I think is going to be good for me, then I'll probably feel better about it.
So it's such an important piece in that. Thank you for sharing that. Choice. It's all of the coping strategies and everything that we've got and everything we've got is based on choice, and those choices are based on assumptions, and those assumptions involve I can do what I like when I like, and I'm not under any form of curfew, and that's been taken away from us, right? So that element of the choices that we get to make, about the things that we're doing, they're different than they were 12 months ago. And it's at the point between lockdown 1.0 and lockdown 2.0, I took my kids to the zoo, and it's astonishing how much of everything that goes on and everything that's in there has an assumption that human beings are able to stand near each other. Just going there and going in and having a look at, I can't remember what we were looking at, I think the gorillas, and everyone was just able to stand next to each other. It's just a basic assumption. Sporting events, basic assumption. You can put human beings next to each other without any public transport. You can put human beings next. There's all these assumptions that are built into our entire way of work, our entire way of living, frankly, that are being challenged. And so it's hard, because it's not just it's a really silly, really stupid thing, but the Romans 2,000 years ago put people in amphitheaters next to each other, right? That assumption has lasted for a very, very long time. And it's suddenly challenged. And all of the choices that we get to make, and all of our belief systems in those assumptions, they're all gone. And you go, oh, that's okay. Oh, so I can't do that. No problems. Hang on, I can't do that either. Right, hang on, I'm going to need to completely rethink this whole process. And it's really hard. And
it's really hard, because we've
we're
got to
all
focus on
making
what we
it as we
have
go
control
along.
of.
Sorry, Sally. Sorry.
I was just saying, yeah, because we have to refocus and figure out what we now have control over, which we didn't have before.
Yeah, because it is that agency, isn't it? It's that control. We like to be able to make the choices that we can. And people keep saying, well, you can't actually make that choice. That's not your choice to make anymore. You know, we've talked about dog. I'm lucky about this. I think my dog has got used to us going out for a walk at about 6:30, 7 o'clock of an evening. How he would have responded if it was we normally go out for a walk at 9 o'clock. We'd have had to adjust. And I know it's a simple and obvious one, but you have to make these. Well, that's not when we like to do that. I like to do that at this time. What's going on? That's not fair. And there's all of those little things like that that kind of chip away, for want of a better term.
I totally agree with you there, Mike. I at the beginning of COVID, it was fortunate, as I said, I live in a virtual world. I remember Sally, you and Brett from MS Translate were doing some interviews about mental health during this time, and also very early on, Brett did interviews with some neurologists, 3 neurologists at Melbourne, and we're sort of asking the questions: what does COVID mean for MS people in general? Are we more in danger and as a group? And it was really comforting to find out the sort of things that we did early on, but the amount of change that has gone on as this has worked through the world, and the changes that people have had to take, it's been wearing very, very thin, Mike. You're exactly right. Even with all my support workers and the live stuff that I've been doing, disconnection just in the last 3 to 4 weeks for me has become much, much bigger, even though I'm still, doing one-to-one telephone calls or tele group calls, Linda. It's getting worse, Sally and Mike, everybody. I'm struggling quite a bit at the moment, thinking not that I want to go out to the supermarket, to be honest, but what I'm starting to not deal as well with what is the long-term future, which is really an interesting thing.
This one's harder because we the first time we got this lockdown, and we kind of went, you know what, we can do this. And it was fun is the wrong word, but people found things to do. They got, you got your kind of drinking club on it. Oh, we're going to have a glass of wine with some friends, and we'll go and do this, and we'll do woodwork, and we'll do all that, and we'll do baking, and sourdough became this amazing thing that people were doing. And there was a sense of, oh, this is new and an adventure. And then we sort of came out of it, and my kids are feeling this. They got to go back to school. They got to, like, honestly, I don't know anyone who the few of us have mentioned. It's rubbish, frankly. The kids are at home. They're on their own. They're not interacting with friends. Kids are social animals. They like being with their friends. And every day now we've just got, right, I've done the work, and they just want to see their friends, and they just want to play. And so we got the first one, the sense of adventure, and we got that done. And then we kind of got released a little bit from it, and we got to return a little bit to normal. And now we're back in it again, and it's just like, right, okay. And also, how long is this one going for? Right, because we kind of came out of it last time, and the strategy that we had in place didn't really work to kind of keep it suppressed and us to not have to lock down again. And how long are we going to be doing this for? can we look at it and go, so we've got what, a month, 3.5, 4 weeks left of this thing. Is that going to be the end of it? What happens after that? Because are the kids going to go back to school? Am I going to be able to go and do this? What happens after that? And that sense of unknown, it's really hard. We can deal with sorry, I'll speak for myself. I can deal with it. It's 4 weeks, and at the end of 4 weeks, this will happen. Right, okay, I can steel myself for that. I can write the days on a board, and I can cross them off as I get through them all. But tell me it's going to be maybe 3, maybe 6, maybe it's not going to, maybe when this vaccine, that's a really high mental load for people to have to deal with, and to keep the positivity of how we will get through this, right? And fast forward 1,000 years, or right? But that's not going to be where we are, and we're not going to be around. So the human race will get through this, but how will we as individuals get through it? We just got to think of a day by day, week by week proposition.
Yeah, I think you're right. It's actually, I sort of feel like it's that complete lack of spontaneity. So you can't just, have that phone call and go, yep, okay, we'll go have coffee, we'll go do this. You're kind of restricted and forced into, you can only go, particularly in Melbourne, for an hour to do this, and everything is timed and planned. And so it's that real lack of spontaneity. And for myself, because I've got a dual role, so I work and I'm a carer, I'm actually involved in a lot of carer support groups. So I've actually taken a few of those up and doing some activities with some of the carer groups in my spare time, which there's plenty of. Funny story though, the first lockdown, I thought, beautiful, time to get the house painted. So had a guy come in, get the house painted, pull the house apart. And of course, stage 2 lockdown, he had to stop, didn't he? So I'm halfway through a house painted. So, it is chaos around it. Hence the reason I've got stars, because you don't want to see the mess behind me. So I've got half a house painted, my furniture everywhere. So I've got little things that I can sort of potter through every now and again, but it's finding that motivation. As I was saying, I'm finding that I'm really tired in that lack of motivation, but, it's getting there. But I also, my downtime is I actually sing in 2 choirs. One's a church choir and one's a community a cappella choir. To keep that connection going, we do that via Zoom. Okay, it's not perfect. You can't all sing at the same time because it sounds like garbled undersea, blah, blah, blah. But you can still learn pieces. You've still got that connection. You're still able to sing, release those endorphins, that sort of thing. So I've tried to keep that going, even though you think, oh, it's an effort. I've got to get onto Zoom and I've got to do this and I've got to do that. I make myself do it and I feel so much better afterwards. I've taken up paint by number. Paint by number is amazing. So I've got a beautiful angel to get into. Netflix, Stan, iView, SBS, I'm hooked. So, instead of reading a story, because I can't sit there and concentrate, I just get lost in a series. That's what my husband and I do at night. That's our little connection. We sit there and watch a thing. I have a greyhound who has now taken up, she's the 3rd person in my bed now. She's my cuddly, touchy-feely, warm, sooky. It's just beautiful. She's just amazing. And the only way I can contact my grandsons is through FaceTime. So I have to actually put up with half an hour of them changing their faces on FaceTime and making their faces into monsters and all of that sort of stuff. And the 3-year-old's got the phone under his nose, so I'm looking up his nasal hair half the time. But it's precious. It is absolutely precious. And what I have learned is this time has actually taught me computer skills I did not have. I've now learned all of these programs, Zoom, FaceTime, WhatsApp conversations, all of those sort of things, making the most of getting out of, utilising this, because not only can I use it with family and friends, I can also use it with clients. And I've realised that I can still record webinars like this, like what we're doing now. You can still continue to provide that education and support out there, by using this. So that's been a real bonus from this. But yeah, I'm just hanging for the day when it's all over, and I guess I live in hope that I can have Christmas Day with my grandchildren. That's you know, sort of trying to think ahead, and like some of you, I don't want to listen to the news every night. I find, you know, listening about death rates and all of this really quite sad. I don't need to hear that all the time, and I appreciate it. I've been to a COVID funeral, so I know what it's like, and I know how distressing it is to have such a small number of people and not being able to embrace those people that, you know, are in need. But I think, you know, I'm just very grateful that we do have access to this sort of forum, that and very grateful that I'm still able to work and still provide that support to people that need it. But, you know, from a personal point of view, I do find it very lonely, and find my four walls very boring, and especially because they're in chaos. So I look at my nice bright coloured walls and think, that's going to be the future. That's where it is. Yeah, just hope, you know, we just hang in there, and we will get there.
Bridie, I just want to say, you know, we're all sorry for your loss. That's a horrible thing to go through at this time. But I think you've touched on a real point that a number of you seem to have come to, which is that thinking about the future is both a challenge and possibly a strategy for getting through. That thinking about the positive things that will hopefully come can be really uplifting, but the uncertainty that surrounds the future can be very challenging. And I'm just cognizant of the time. We only have a few more minutes left, so I just want to open it up to see if anyone has any last things that they'd like to say as we sort of bring the discussion toward a close.
There's one I've just been thinking about this as we've been talking through this, and just to kind of close out on a slightly more positive piece. I'm originally from the UK. I've spent more time talking to my parents and my brother in the past 6 months than I have done I've been here for 17 years. I reckon I've had more time talking to my brother in the last 6 months than I have in that entire 17 years. And so there's this sense of reconnection, and there's actually this sense of, well, I'm going to keep that going. So I speak to my brother, and we kind of do that. So I speak to my brother every fortnight and my parents every fortnight on a Sunday night. And you just kind of look at that and go, well, there's something that's come back from being here. And you know, you do it over video, and mum and dad are having coffee and we're having dinner kind of thing. And it's actually been really nice. And watch kids on Zoom. My kids play Roblox with their mates and have a FaceTime going at the same time, and that's just one of the things that's happening in technology. So there is all of these things that are happening that are and will be positive that we can take from it, and it's going to be interesting to think about how we don't lose those as we return to normal. And what, you know, keep the good stuff, carry on doing that, and try to not remember too much about the bad stuff.
I think that's a wonderful note to end on, Mike. I really appreciate that. And I'd like to thank everybody for participating. It's been really lovely. And I would like to thank everybody who's watched. And we appreciate you taking part. If you'd like to learn more about various things related to MS, we have a course that's opening in September. The Understanding MS online course will open for its next iteration in mid-September, and we will be including the recorded version of this conversation in that course. So again, thank you to everyone, and I hope you have a great rest of your day.